Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence independent media production. We are super excited to get to extend the little kind of experiment we went into with upgrading snare mechanisms a little while back with some more hardware for kind of boosting the potential of your drum set at home. A lot of people gave us some really great comments, feedback, thoughts about the upgrade with the INDe Drums strainer mechanism a few weeks ago on the show. And unbeknownst to me, but knownst to Ben, INDe makes a lot of other little hardware upgrades that you can add to virtually any normal drum set to lower the weight if you're traveling, to upgrade sustain and just the general placement of things, and largely, maybe entirely, without drilling holes. And so we got kind of psyched about that, and Josh was kind enough to both sponsor this episode and send us a ton of stuff to retrofit the little nesting kit that we keep here at the studio with those things, which seemed appropriate since it is a travel kit. We want this thing to be as light as possible, we want to have as few stands as possible, and we want to be able to also set it up as fast as possible once we get to the gig. Now, first of all, this kit here is a nesting kit that was custom made for me before I moved here, actually, when I still lived in Seattle, from Drummers World in New York City. And it is a 10, a 14, and an 18, and they do the nesting thing, the Russian doll thing of kind of splitting in half, and they all go inside of each other. Makes for really easy travel. However, all of the hardware appointments on it are modern, fairly run-of-the-mill, and not light. The legs on the bass drum are pretty beefy, the legs on the floor tom are pretty beefy, the lugs, everything. So what we're going to try out today is see just how much we can kind of dial this thing in with all the things that Josh at INDe was kind enough to send over. And this is going to do something to every single one of the drums on the kit, and I'm really excited about it. We're going to start with the bass drum spurs. The ones that were on this drum are pretty run-of-the-mill, pretty beefy, pretty heavy, 4-bolt, the kind of thing you're used to seeing on kits. And these ultralight replacements are kind of a two-part thing. First of all, we're replacing the bracket, and then we're also replacing the legs themselves. And they are sort of reminiscent of vintage legs in terms of like the swing-out spurs that come out of the brackets, Ludwig's, things like that. These are kind of like the next step past that, which is to say that the spurs themselves are ultralight. They're super-duper light. And the brackets have a sort of bend in them. It's a suspension mount kind of system, which is going to give us more resonance, more kind of boom out of the drum, and also it's frankly less material, so we are removing weight from the existing system that we were using. Every single piece that we're using here also has a built-in kind of memory lock system, which is definitely something you want with this kind of spur so that you're not dealing with them spinning out or coming out or anything like that. Works seamlessly. We had no trouble with any of that. Next up, we swapped out the brackets for the floor tom legs as well as the legs themselves. Similar design to the receptacle for the bass drum legs, similar material for the legs themselves. We're going for the same kind of thing, which is we're removing weight from the drum for easier transport. We're also getting a kind of spring-loaded suspension structure going on that's going to boost resonance and tone and sustain, all that stuff that we want out of the floor tom. And the legs are ridiculously light, so your hardware case is going to be lighter as well. Next up, maybe the biggest kind of visually noticeable change that we made is the ultralight tom holder system. It is a rail system that you may have seen something that visually resembles it from older kits from back in the day. And the idea here is we're using a no-drill version of this. So the version we installed can be used on Virgin bass drums, or you can put it on an INDe bass drum. There's an alternative method for if you're replacing kind of a standard post through the drum kind of mount as well, but we decided to do the rail just frankly because it looked more interesting. What we're dealing with here is replacing two lugs on the bass drum itself, the two top ones on the reso side. The replacement ones receive the tension screws for the front head the same as your old ones, but they have this additional portion that is sort of hooked over again in a suspension-y kind of way with a rail on it that you insert this vertical mounting system into. everything on the vertical piece of the system is kind of locked down once you get your tom where you want. Then there's just one kind of wing nut handle that releases tension on that piece from the rail itself, so you can slide it out and throw it in your hardware bag. And it's basically your same setup every time you want to use it. You don't have to fuss with a bunch of screws or anything like that. Additionally, we also replaced the mounting bracket on the tom. Similar system. I think we're starting to see kind of a theme here, which is that a lot of these parts are interchangeable, and most of them are kind of like family members from the same idea, which is that we're looking for strength, we're looking for lightweight, and we're also looking for added resonance and tone anywhere that we can get it. The mount on the tom, similar situation. All right, that's all the structural stuff. Now we're going to talk about the percussion-y, mounty stuff. First one is the device that we're using to mount this cowbell. We don't normally have a cowbell on the set here, but since they sent us this, we got excited and we put one on there. And this is super cool because it's similar to the rail in the front, where we've replaced one of the lugs on the drum with this other lug that has the mounting apparatus kind of built into it. And this is great because there are all sorts of things that you can put into this kind of, I don't know what's called, receptacle, I guess. L-arms, little cymbal mounts. There's some other parts that we have that are for extending things and connecting the kind of like sticks together to make maybe like a multi-ended kind of thing if you wanted to have a couple of them on there. It's kind of like you can build what you need it to be out of the parts. And since it is so, again, kind of low profile to the drum, it means that you don't have to bring another piece in order to mount whatever little percussion device you want to have coming off of the drum in that location. Now, when you choose between the BR2 and the BR3 version of this little device, you can basically choose whether you want to use pre-existing holes that are in your drum or whether you want to replace a lug instead. What this amounts to is basically never having to drill new holes to use these, which is what is so fantastic about them, basically. Non-invasive, doesn't mean that you're doing anything super crazy to your drum. Lastly, the one that I'm having the most fun with is the cymbal mount off the bass drum, which again, kind of vintage inspired, reminds me of things that I've seen. And again, non-invasive. It's similar to how we mounted the cowbell, but a much longer arm with a cymbal mount on the end of it. This is super cool because again, no cymbal stand. I can't stress enough how light these sticks are that these are being mounted on. It's amazing. But they're not really flopping around or anything like that either. They feel very stable to me. I'm not feeling any kind of impact on my playing or anything like that. And I love the shrunken kind of footprint on the floor and imagining how much lighter my hardware bag is going to be by integrating things like this into the kit. And particularly, again, if you're living in New York or someplace where you have to wedge into small places to play, anything off the floor, anything that's brought in closer is going to make your life a whole lot easier. Now, all of the brackets that we're using here have a kind of U shape to them, where one side is affixed to the drum and the other side is holding the weight of whatever we're mounting on it. And what this is resulting in is a bit of a suspension of whatever's being mounted, whether it's the case of the bass drum by the bass drum legs or the rack tom by that mounting the legs on the floor tom. And this is leading us to get more tone and more fundamental out of all of the drums that we're using this way. Without getting too far into it, basically we're talking about a combination of less mass on the shell and more separation from gravity. It's getting to be kind of hung out in the air and move a little bit. I have used suspension mounts that cause the drum to wobble a lot, and that's kind of spooky, and I've used other ones that didn't seem to really sound that different than when I had it bolted to the drum. These currently are my favorite in terms of the kit feeling exactly the same as before we did it when everything was hard mounted, but they are much louder and much more tone, and for my money, more inspiring to play with all of the things we were trying today. One of the hallmarks for me of a cool addition to my drum set is unintended surprise awesome things. And it did not come up in the talking about doing this that it was going to change the sound dramatically or the feel. And that was just kind of a nice surprise by being engineered in this way by people who understand drums and understand sound and also have a very strong engineering background and a sense of these kinds of things and how to make them happen. We're kind of getting the best of both worlds here, which is a better, stronger system that's also giving us a better, stronger sound. Unlike a lot of things that we've seen that are purporting to make your life easier on the drum set, solutions in search of a problem, this is clearly designed and thought out by a person who understands the points of discomfort with setting up your kit, doing it quickly, having it be easy to carry, and having it be consistently functional without any kind of like weak points or spooky stuff going on the gig. The overarchingly great thing about this particular system to me is that in addition to it doing what it says it's going to do and also give us a great sound, it has been built in such a way that it can be affixed to most any kit. All the screw spacings are adjustable. We didn't have any trouble fitting anything anywhere on this particular drum set, and I looked at the measurements and it looks like it would work on both my vintage stuff, where maybe I would like to have a lightweight rail, as well as on modern stuff where maybe you want to lose some of that ridiculously heavy hardware that was kind of popular for a long time. At this point, I'm thinking about just anything I can do to a kit I already have that's going to make doing the job easier. And frankly, also, I have to say that's aesthetically pleasing. That doesn't jump out as being weird or ridiculous looking or kind of drawing away from the drums that I have that I like, that I want people to be thinking about the sound that I'm making and things like that. This is all low profile, kind of under the radar stuff that can really streamline the functionality no matter what kind of kit you're using. Now, you might be like me. I'm a big tinkerer. I like to take things apart. I like to experiment with anything that comes off of my instrument that can be replaced with a different version. And this kind of upgrade fits into kind of a larger concept, which is that by virtue of the way that drum sets work, everything comes off. The hoops come off, the heads, the hardware, everything comes off. And if you are just curious, like try swapping out a hoop, try swapping out a head, try swapping out a mount like this, or just if you're curious about having a cowbell on your bass drum and you don't want to remember to take a cowbell mount with you. It's all about the possibilities and about the experimental just options that there are that are not nearly as expensive as buying one more drum or, a whole nother kit. We've gotten a lot of mileage here at the show out of messing around with hoops, messing around with heads, messing around with sticks. And this is one of our first times seeing what can happen when you can do that with the hardware on the kit. And it has been super fun. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you hear about our new episodes. They're coming out every week like clockwork, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesdays. Thank you so much to Independent Drum Lab for helping us out, sharing all of this cool stuff with us. Please hit him up, YouTube, Instagram. He's one of the guys out there that is making our lives easier and also more interesting with little mods to do to the kit. They also have drums and a lot of other amazing things. Thanks so much to him for making this episode possible. It's been really fun to dig into this and really kind of start over with this kit from the ground up. And lastly, I'm super curious about hardware mods that you've done. Anywhere from, the hose clamp in lieu of a memory lock on up to whatever. I know I've got my list of favorites, and I'm always excited to hear more.